Before the French Revolution, France was in a state of financial distress. French society was made up of three portions: the first estate, the second estate, and the third estate. The first estate was the upper class, which was made up of the clergymen. This was a very small portion of the population, about 1%, but they were very powerful. Their complaint was that they had a lot of economic power, but they did not have any political power. They wanted to use their money to buy their way into government and to buy power. A major part of their plan was to eliminate the king from French government. The second estate was the middle class, which was made up of nobles. This was also a very small portion of the population, but it was still larger than the first estate. The second estate made up about 2% of the population. They were very happy with their position, because they were exempt from many of the taxes that the French government imposed upon the third estate. However, their problem was that they were caught up in the middle of the mess. The third estate was the largest portion of the population. This was the regular townsfolk, and they made up about 97% of the population. The third estate had its own little mini social classes within. They had the upper portion of the third estate, who were the doctors and merchants. They had lots of money as a result of their occupations, and they were a top social ladder in regards to the normal people. However, they did not have any political power because they were not nobility. They wanted political power to go along with their money. They were very similar to the first estate because they also wanted to eliminate the monarch. The middle portion of the third estate, who were the merchants, wanted lower taxes. The peasants were the lowest of the low, and they wanted the government to supply them with money and food because they did all the labor and got no rewards. With all the commotion that was going on between the different social classes, the government did not have a lot of money, and as a result, had a very hard time enforcing the laws. This paved the way for the French Revolution to occur.
The Estate General was the very first meeting between the legislative assembly of all the different classes, including the first estate, the clergy, second estate, the nobility, and third estate, the townspeople. They were all commonly assembled by King Louis XVI in a courtyard of a prominent hotel to discuss possible solutions for the economic crisis that the government was going through. For several weeks, the Estates General argued about the financial issues that burdened France, but ultimately came to an impasse due to the fact that the three estates could not agree on anything and clashed constantly, making it impossible for progress to happen. It soon came to an end when many of the third estate, who were the townspeople that made up 97% of the French population, formed into the National Assembly. The forming of the National Assembly was one of the first signals of the start of the French Revolution. The Tennis Court Oath was a revolutionary act made by the people of France and the National Assembly to limit the power of the monarch and give more political authority to the people and their representatives. It was a pledge signed by 576 members from the Third Estate, which was made up of mostly the townspeople who were unfortunately locked out of the meeting of the Estates General. They made a makeshift conference room in an indoor tennis court located in the city of Versailles. This was the very first time where French citizens actually stood in opposition to Louis XVI, the King of France at the time. The National Assembly, run by a moderate French revolutionary, Gabriel Equetti, congregated this nearby tennis court to make the oath to never separate and to reassemble under any circumstances until the Constitution of the Kingdom is established. They continued to have these meetings despite the royal prohibition, declaring that the king must be present in the event of discussing political policies. The oath ultimately inspired various amounts of other revolutionary activities, such as rioting in other parts of France. In the end, the oath effectively reinforced the power of the assembly and limited the power of the king.
The storming of Bastille Prison on July 14, 1789, was an event that paved the way to further chaos and anarchy in France. From here, this is what caused the snowball effect and what caused a revolution against an oppressive monarchy. This day is still special because it was one of the first steps that sparkled the revolution. The Bastille was situated in east of Paris in the working-class district of Saint-Antoine. There were many rumors around the working class about storming of Bastille, which caused people to actually storm the castle. There was a constant threat from aristocrats who were known for not giving people food and making them starve. The king was too suspected for planning and preparing a violent suppression of the French Republic through the use of military. The final straw was when King stripped the Necker of his ministry as he was popular amongst the people. This was done on July 12th, 1789, which was the last straw and sparked the revolution. On August 26, 1789, the Declaration of Rights of Man and of the Citizen were passed by the National Assembly. This shows to the world a summary of the rules and regulations of the revolution, and justified the destruction of the government based upon absolutism and privilege, and the establishment of new government based upon non-negotiable rights of individuals and the public equality. The Declaration became the prologue to the Constitution of 1791. It has been referred to in almost every single revolutionary movement since 1789, has been translated into nearly all major languages. It is the basis of the constitutional foundations of many countries, including France's Fifth Republic.
On October 5th, 1789, the March of Versailles took place, and it was one of the most violent parts of the French Revolution. It is first important to know that at this time people primarily ate bread, but in 1789 the price of bread greatly increased. Many people were starving and became desperate. So one morning in a marketplace in Paris, women grew tired of the scarcity and high prices of the bread. They started marching towards Versailles, the city in France where the king lived. It was also a place associated with luxury and wealth. When the women reached Versailles, the original group grew to thousands of people that were armed with pitchforks, pikes, swords, and crowbars. They stormed in the palace demanding for bread. King Louis XVII quickly agreed to provide bread for Paris. In addition, the people wanted the king to move back to Paris. The king also agreed, and so his court moved to Paris. This successful march represents a change in France. The people are starting to gain power, and the nobility weakens. It also represents women's rights. This march was primarily made up of women who stood up for themselves. Since the people of France captured the king, Austria and Prussia created the Declaration of Pillnitz. This states that France must return to its monarchy and not harm the king, or Austria and Prussia would get involved. It also calls on other European powers, like England, to support Prussia and Austria. This document was sent out to protect the king, but also to make sure that the French Revolution wouldn't inspire the people of Austria and Prussia to start their own revolution. The revolutionaries started to feel threatened, and so they declared war on Austria and Prussia on April 20th, 1792. But the two countries predicted this reaction and already had troops ready. The French army lost the battle, but would later go on to invade Prussia and Austria. In 1793, Austria, Prussia, England, and other European powers formed the first coalition against France.
The National Assembly was made up of members of the Third Estate. They formed a constitution restricting the powers of the king based on taking the sovereign powers in respect of taxation. In 1792, a second revolution took place, as Jacobins, who were a political group, and Scanselists, who were urban workers, artisans, and minor landholders, forced the assembly to replace itself with the National Convention, which abolished the monarchy, declared France a republic, and in 1793 executed the king. The National Convention created the Committee of Public Safety in 1793. The committee originally consisted of 9 members and then increased to 12. It was a political body of the French Revolution that gained virtual dictatorial control over France during the Reign of Terror. The purpose of the committee was to supervise food distribution, as well as give France defense during the Revolution against foreign and domestic enemies. At first, George Stanton dominated the committee. However, they were replaced by the radical Jacobins, which were a political group. The group included Maximilien Robespierre. Harsh measures were taken against alleged enemies of the revolution. The economy was placed on a wartime basis and mass conscription was undertaken. When Robespierre down fell, so did the importance of the committee.
After the conservatives and reactionaries failed to stop the reforms, the radicals took over and began to make immediate changes to the way the government and society were run. They felt that the conservatives who were previously in control were acting too slowly, so the radicals went to extreme measures to ensure that they got what they wanted. The radicals used guillotines to behead anybody and everybody who stood in their way or tried to stop the revolution. From 1793 to 1794, anywhere from 15,000 to 40,000 people executed on the guillotine by the radicals during the Reign of Terror. Eventually, the reactionaries were able to stop the radicals. They ended many of the reforms that the radicals had brought about, and they replaced them with the old ways of the previous government. A more moderate government took place, and a period of peace and stability was ushered in. This led to the rise of Napoleon. After the long and exhausting revolution, France had been in a state of distress and instability for approximately 10 years. This resulted in France being in desperate need for someone respected and organized to take charge and bring France back to order. That someone was Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon already had the respect and admiration of many, as he was a high-ranking general in the French military. Napoleon was the general who had led France to victory against the Directory, and as a result, Napoleon became the first consul of France. Later on, Napoleon became the emperor and had complete power. Napoleon mixed conservative views with radical views to create a more moderate government that left more people happy. This allowed France to keep a very stable government in the future. Napoleon implemented several reforms that would allow French people of all social classes to be happy with the government. These included a tax code, the Banque de France, which was the central bank of France, and most importantly, the Napoleonic Code, which provided a sense of order and laws for France to remain prosperous for the future. The French Revolution lasted from 1789 to 1799. It was a time of reform and change, both politically and socially. The French Revolution could be looked at as a model revolution because it contained all the archetypal characteristics of a revolution. The French government was having financial problems. There were disputes between the social classes. A group of moderate rulers gained power, but radicals eventually took over because they wanted change to happen faster. Many people were killed in acts of violence, and eventually a strong ruler, in this case Napoleon, took over and restored order, implementing a moderate government again, and things reverted back to normal. The French Revolution achieved many of the goals that were part of the Enlightenment period. These included the growth of a republic, which began to become more popular in the early modern period, the growth of liberalism, as a new left-wing way of thinking emerged, and social reforms. As a result of the Napoleonic Code and the Declaration of Rights of Man and of the Citizen, French people gained more freedoms and liberties that they did not have before. This was another common theme of the Enlightenment. The French Revolution was a major step forward for the people of France and can be looked at as a turning point in world history.
Tell me that it's evolution.